Hello everyone, Mark Paciuti here again. This is the second in our series of short videos on all things mental health, and today I'd like to talk about how anxiety used to cause major indecisiveness in my life. Back in the days when I used to suffer from anxiety, there were two words that would constantly race around inside my head, and those two words were simply what and if. Let me explain a bit further. In 2010, when I was at my very worst, I would still somehow manage to put on a brave face and a smile and struggle through my work in IT as well as my general day-to-day life. At work, there were two team managers who reported to me, and they would regularly present me with situations, options and recommendations upon which it was my responsibility to make the final decision. But sometimes even the simplest of those decisions could lead to a swarm of those what-if scenarios racing around inside my head. If I do this, what if that happens? If I do that, what if this happens? If I do nothing, what if something else happens? And so on and so on and so on. Round and round inside my head, the swarm of what-ifs would fly, grow, overlap and intertwine around every endless scenario, decision and possible irrational outcome I could possibly imagine. And because I was always thinking this way, I was always so exhausted and I always felt so busy. I couldn't switch off from work whenever I came home at night or whenever I would lie awake in the middle of the night. But then one day, not long after I finally defeated my inner demons, my indecisiveness also started to improve, and it all stemmed from an annual performance review, or to be more specific, from some 360-degree feedback from one of those two team managers who I mentioned to you earlier, a friend and a former colleague by the name of Alec. Alec's feedback was along the lines that I was a fair and decent manager and he generally enjoyed working in my team. Off to a good start, I thought, though I sensed a but coming up. But, he added, I was also extremely indecisive. Or worse, sometimes I would make a decision, he would then go and act on that decision, and then a few days later, usually because of another what-if scenario popping into my head, I would change my mind. Although he didn't say it outright, Alec's feedback made me realise the impact of my own indecisiveness. It was impacting others too, and it was wasting their time and slowing up their own work and their own progress. Alec added that I also always seem to be looking for the perfect risk-free decision. Noting that we don't have crystal balls, nor do we always have all the information available to us to make the perfect risk-free decision, Alec suggested that the best thing I could do would be to start making firm decisions based on common sense, based on what I knew, right or wrong, and then move on. I could then deal with any potential consequences later only if required. Alec's feedback was constructive, firm, fair and direct. It was also meant to be anonymous, but Alec was also ex-army. He knew the importance of being firm, fair, direct and decisive in life or death situations. So it was quite clear to me this feedback came from him, and he confirmed that was the case when I mentioned it to him a few months later. Since then, I learned to make faster and firmer decisions, free of those swarming what-if thoughts. I also feel less busy, yet more productive, because I no longer waste time pointlessly overthinking things. Once I make a firm decision nowadays, I can stick to it and move on to something else, and I can deal with any consequences later. I can also switch off from work when it comes time to go home and focus on some me time or some family time. Now, this last bit I know is easier said than done, but I also know from experience that it is possible. If you too constantly find yourself with asking yourself what if scenarios every time you have to make a decision, why not, even just the next time you have to make a decision, just pause for a moment. Make the most sensible decision based on what you know and stick with it, and focus on how proud you can feel of yourself in doing so, and then just see what happens from there. After all, what if you don't?